gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, RFK Refugees Podcast. Ted here, John here, a classic edition, a RFK Refugees classic.
This is a blow on the cartridge and push it down and like close the door type of show. That's an old person reference.
Yes. Oh man, dude, don't say that.
What?
Don't say
it
that.
Is true. It's true,
yeah.
man. It's true now.
Man. Don't start with me. Don't start with me.
Listen,
but
you're so young. At 31 or 30.
30. I'm 30. I'll be 31 in January. But we're here for the last show of 2021. I'm going to go ahead and say that with a pretty confident bout, unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, no, I think it's safe to say.
Safe to say this will be the last show of 2021. We have news to talk about, though. And I think this is why we wait so long, because we have news to talk about. Before we get into that, John, how was your weekend, my friend? How'd it go?
Yeah, how was my weekend? Okay. I think I felt sick. I watched Chelsea lose again. Chelsea is very bad right now. As a Liverpool fan, I'm sure that doesn't bother you very much. But I miss MLS. I want the preseason to start, which is like in a month and a half, which is kind of bananas. But yeah, man. How about you? What I don't know. I don't remember what I got into. What did you do?
I mean, I guess I watched. My wife finished up her exams, her law school, so she's halfway done.
Nice.
So we went out to eat on the Friday night, and then went to see. We're both big Guillermo del Toro fans. We did not go see the new Spider-Man movie. We showed our age, I feel like, and went and saw Nightmare Alley, which was an interesting film. I felt like I expected more weirdness, though. Del Toro was trying his hardest to be as weird as he could in some of those scenes.
Del Toro is the guy with the mermaid fish sex in the last movie, right?
Yep. Seen that too.
Didn't see that, so I don't know.
Yeah, but it was a fun.
Is that one I should go back and watch, Ted? Is that a? It's one of those things that had all the awards in the time at the moment, and then like a couple years, maybe you look back and like, whoa, was that worth all that? What should I watch it?
I still think it's a very good movie. I appreciate the actors that are in it. They're both really good. The fish monster is very Del Toro. Mm-hmm. In a way, yes, the relationship thing's a little weird, but overall, I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was a really enjoyable movie. I had an enjoyable time. I enjoyed Nightmare Alley was a little weird in that I think they started like spent half the movie like developing all these characters, and then they kind of like shift gears and then don't really develop much else, and it's just kind of a it's based off a classic apparently, so I think they didn't have the material was not really there to work with, I think, in this case, but it's still well shot. Well acted, very noir style film. But and then other than that, I played Football Manager. I just checked my Steam stats. I have now logged 70 hours.
Here we go.
Bought the game at the beginning of the month.
Why is there no Twitch content here, Ted? Let's go. You got merchandise.
I want to be good at the game first, so I managed my two Bundesliga side, FC Heidenheim, got them to the Bundesliga my first season, which I'm counting that pretty successful, and then I'm dreading the fact that I'm going to get blown out because I can't sign anybody because I don't have the money to do so.
What if it's better? What if it's better viewing if you suck at it? Like if you're too good at it, is that entertaining? I don't know.
Maybe. I'm working on some interesting content. So let me know if you guys think this would be interesting. I want to do me versus Hernan. So first of all, I need to see if I can get the 2022 schedule, because right now it's like in the 2021. So I need to see. I'm sure there's going to be updates and mods, and maybe I can go in and kind of do it myself. But I want to do that type of content where I go head to head against Hernan to see if I can do better in the regular season versus him. So
I think you should do that.
Stay tuned. We're gonna have some fun with it. But
we gotta fill January somehow, right?
Yeah, it's a fun and interesting game. The MLS detail. I'm now getting immersed in the MLS rules, and I'm like, I know general allocation. I know targeted allocation. Nope. Are
those rules specific, like that correct?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh, they have the general allocation. They have the draft. I had a funny moment where I was trying to get an international slot because I wanted to sign a player from Iraq who I had on trial. And I offered some allocate. I did like the traditional MLS, like 100,000 in GAM. Mm-hmm. And I got countered with giving them my 2023 first round draft pick for the international slot and then $400,000 in GAM. I smacked that like button on that.
That's insane.
Funniest thing ever. Anyway.
I got to play. This sounds fun. Anyway.
Yeah. It is incredible amounts of fun, incredibly detailed too. It will be a time suck if you are a nerd like me, 70 hours in 1 month on the game. So.
I like it.
Anyway, let's talk. Let's shift gears. Let's talk DC United. Let's talk Washington Spirit. We've had an eventful couple weeks. Let's start with DC United. I think that's the appropriate place to start because we're going to probably have mostly Spirit coverage because they've been the more active and interesting of the two teams. The really only notable loss for DC, if you can call it a loss, everybody pretty much thought this was going to happen. Joseph Mora lost in the expansion draft to Charlotte. Did you watch the expansion draft, by the way?
No.
You did not catch it?
My nerdiness, my MLS nerdiness has declined a little bit in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I felt more of that exhaustion too. Normally, like I would sit through the drafts because normally those are like during the week, and of course I work remote, so it's actually works really well because it's the perfect thing to have on. That's 4 hours long from like 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock because you just leave it on. You can just zone out. Don't have to pay attention to it. But it's on a Saturday. I got things to do. So I like had the draft kind of go. Anyway, I did watch the expansion draft. I was cooking watching it. Very weird production. So they had it at the Charlotte Stadium.
The Panther Stadium.
Yeah, the Panther Stadium. Correct.
Any football team stadium slight I can throw in there, I'm going to do.
Yeah, so, I mean, they do the announcement. It's not like, when you have the two teams, there's not a lot of drama. They know the 5 players they're going to select and everything. They're really just listing them off, and then they're kind of like doing some other things. It's also, I think, a way to advertise the team.
It was an hour, though, right?
It was an hour, yeah. which seems quaint compared to some of what the NWSL expansion draft and subsequent draft seemed to take. But then I think at the end they actually asked, like, I forget the guy they had on there, like a normal MLS guy asked, what's allocation money? How does this allocation money thing work? Oh, it's like he's trying to like explain it. Oh, it's money that the league gives you that you can do.
How much time you got? Would be like, well, we got to fill an hour, so you can actually explain all the player mechanisms thing, and we'll have 5 minutes left over for player picks.
All the rules and all. It was actually at the end, which was the funny part about it. So all the picks were already basically done.
We're actually out of time. You thought we could have started this earlier.
It was, but it was all done by like the local like Charlotte station, and then they kind of like that was the interesting part is that it was produced. Normally these things are kind of produced by MLS and like they just kind of read off the picks. This one was actually produced by the local Charlotte TV station. So that was cool. Gave it a little more of a homegrown type feel. But DC United, of course, losing Joseph Mora in the expansion draft. They will get $50K in GAM. And for a player, basically, they said would not be back. So I think all in all, you get $50,000 for something.
I wish it were $50. That would be hilariously insulting.
You think there are any trades like any of the GAM trades before it became public were like that low?
Probably. Like, how would you like Chipotle catering for your office for a week?
It's like the Moneyball scene when he like trades him and says, "Oh, you'll stock my
soda fridge."
Soda's fridge.
You and I have been talking about Joseph Mora and his weird fit for Hernan, all year pretty much. And I was looking at his stats today. He played more than I thought he did. He had 26 appearances and 16 starts, which I think may have been more about injuries. There were lots of times during the season when we had not enough guys on the bench. But he's not played at all for Costa Rica all year long. And I think he was always a sort of a nailed-on starter for them for quite a while with his time at DC United. So I think this change probably gets him back on the radar for the national team. And also, depending on what type of, I have no idea what type of, they don't have a full roster yet, but what they want to play down in Charlotte. If they happen to play a 4-man backline, Joseph Mora is probably your guy. I think he's still a really good player. He's a good MLS player, just not a good fit for what DC United is trying to do right now.
Yeah, he fits that classic kind of 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, where maybe he becomes a guy who can contribute something on the offensive end. The problem for DC is I think you had Kevin Paredes and obviously Julian Gressel, who are very much more attack-minded players. And so they are ones that will go forward, and they have the ability to go forward. So I think that is probably where you're going to see most of why he maybe lost his fit in DC. We've talked about this, but good for him. Good that DC got. It's probably like the best like expansion draft pick ever for DC because it was a player nobody expected to be back, and they get a little something for him. So
it's nice when the stupidness of MLS roster like machinations help the team. Usually they don't, but this was one of those times where here's free money for a thing you don't want. That would be awesome. But that's not all that Charlotte took from DC, quote unquote, since you can't see the video. Jordi Reyna also signed for Charlotte as a free agent almost immediately. I think he might have been the first free agent to sign that was eligible to be signed. Obviously unclear about what his salary looks like for next year. You had some thoughts on this, I think, on Twitter about sort of maybe you had hoped that, putting money aside, maybe DC United could have found a way to keep him.
Yeah, I mean, he was. I kind of look at. So I look at who do I want back? Who was kind of, you knew this was the last year, and Jordi Reyna was one of those players. I mean, he was streaky, but when he was on, and he was particularly good for DC. I understand DC needs some roster room. If you want to give Hernan what he wants, you need to give him the roster room to do that. So I think Jordi, for me, not seeing him there as an indication is at least somewhat of an indication to me that the team is going to try to look to find something either internationally or likewise that's going to fit Hernan's style, be a player Hernan wants to bring in, and hopefully be a successful player. So I see why they made the move they did. All in all, he was probably like one of my more favorite players from 2021. Just some of the things he did, some of the games he played, how well he sort of grew into that roster. Mm-hmm. So I think Charlotte got a good player that I think they got a good base on. So I'll be curious to see how he does in Charlotte and how well he plays.
So as far as other DC United roster rules, I think everyone has sort of been, or roster changes, everyone has sort of been pounding on the Twitter like, hey guys, announce something. The meme where they're poking the dead thing with a stick and saying do something.
It's that time of year again, isn't it?
It is that time of year. It is that time. Everybody wants a Christmas present, and I get it. I want a Christmas present too. Here is a small Christmas present. Ted Pietro, a player that I have been talking about and teasing as signing a DC United contract, is now close to signing a DC United contract. Has not yet. Maybe that's our Christmas present. But since Ted had been on I interviewed Ted like the beginning of last season, maybe in between the two seasons, and he had a fantastic season. Mm-hmm. What we talked about at the time was sort of the rigors of the professional game, how different it was from the youth game, how hard it is to train at a high level all the time and be on all the time. And he made a great jump this year on a really, really unsuccessful Loudoun team. He played 30 times, scored 7 goals, which was obviously for a last place team, probably the leading goal scorer, and I believe he was. He was. 3 assists. Didn't get any red cards this year like he did the previous year, and really he's just. I think Ryan Kiefer, what's his Twitter handle at Refa K, talked about the fact that he moved out of his parents' house. He'd got into nutrition, so he took it seriously, right? And I think the team is rewarding him for making that jump. And this is what he said he wanted a year and a half ago. This was the goal. That's what he was shooting for. So I'm happy for him that he got there. And I think he's a player that, right-sided midfield, depending on we're about to talk about a rumor here in a second that he sort of might play a Griffin Yao type of role on this team, which is a slight issue because Griffin Yao is still here and didn't find the field very much last year. But you want to have talent available. And I think that most likely he's going to be sort of a much more of a tweener than Griffin was as far as playing between here and Loudoun next year. What are your general feelings on the signing?
I mean, I think it's good. He was a player, I think. There are all these players and that maybe you get a little bit excited about. I think about Colin Martin a lot when I talk about guys because I saw him live in Richmond and he was so good for Richmond. He made just a couple really nice passes, and I thought this guy's going to be playing for DC soon, and it never quite worked out. And I was worried. You saw some bright things from Ted Pietro in the very limited minutes because those Loudoun games were a slog. But you saw some good things. But you get concerned when a guy starts to get 17, 18, and they're still on that Loudoun contract. Is he going to kind of fade away like so many other? I think he's more of an indication to me, at least, that. We've talked about DC struck gold with Andy Nahar, Bill Hamid, and then it was a doldrum. I mean, there were some players. There maybe a couple guys got some spots. Rodney Wallace, I think. Well, no, he's a draft pick. Never mind. But I'm trying to think. I know there was a guy who went to play for NYC, and I can't think of his name right now. It's gonna kill me that I can't think of it right now. But Ethan White. Thank you. So I mean, there've been guys who have kind of come up through the academy. Ethan White may have been drafted too. I can't even really remember.
Out of Maryland, I believe that's correct. I think that was in the time where they started like signing players right before drafts. They would raid the draft pool with homegrown homegrown signings. So
I think they would also draft guys who they had in their academy because they did once they got down the draft. Well, I don't know. Take this guy. We know this guy. Let's bring him in.
Yep.
But basically, so I mean, but there was nothing really from this academy pool for years, and now we're seeing, guys like Griffin Yao, guys like Kevin Paredes, Moses Nyman, and now Ted Kudu Pietro. It really does start to feel like now you got Jacob Green, Jeremy Garay.
Garay.
Garay. Okay. Is also another guy who's coming through. So it really does feel like they're starting to build out an actual, it's not just one or two players that you're interested in now from the side. It's like 5, 6, 7. And that's a very, very good thing. You have guys that are willing to go out there and compete for minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sort of pivoting from the positives here on us actually signing a player. I wouldn't call this a negative, but it was sort of a curious news item for DC United to see. Paul Arriola was linked with a transfer to LA Galaxy and also, I believe, Tijuana. That was another name sort of bandied about. I think the first tweet sort of said something like, conversations have already happened between the player and the agent and the team, but there's been no contact with DC United. DC United quickly comes out and says, we have no inclination to trade him. There is nothing to this rumor. I think that was through Goff, I believe was the mechanism there. We'll talk about, there's some Twitter questions about this here that we'll get to in a second, but I'll let you go first. What were your general feelings first when you saw it? And then how do you feel now after you heard the supposed rebuttal through Steve Goff?
I mean, my first thought was, this doesn't seem like something DC United would normally do in an offseason. And for that, it's kind of like when you have a deadbeat dad actually does something nice, and I don't want to call DC a deadbeat dad, but it's like you expect your expectations of DC are for this offseason are still relatively the same, especially when you know their situation with the designated player slots. I want this team to fill that third designated player spot. That is still something I think they need to do, and you don't need to spend that much money to do it. Not as much money as people think to do it, but I think it would be an indication if they could fill that slot with somebody. But this felt like a move like, okay, maybe DC is trying to do something. Maybe they're looking at, Paul had a successful 2021. I think that's fair to say. For all, stats, how much he was on the field, certainly more successful than their other designated player. But I mean, he still had some injury concerns. He was not available through stretches of the season when the team struggled in the beginning of the year, and when they went through that really, really dry spot kind of towards the end of the season. So you have to look at that and say, do we maybe look at getting something back for him? I think a sale to Europe is kind of off the table, at least for right now. Maybe that changes. So maybe DC looks at this as an opportunity to bring something different in and to give Hernan maybe a little bit extra room where he can go and get a high price talent. I did afterwards be like, okay, we're here in LA, we're hearing Arriola talk about it. I know we'll get into the question of tampering. I don't know how necessarily legitimate that is, and I'll get into why it's a little different than what I think people are thinking about with the other move, but we're hearing that. I said, well, let's see if there's any. Once we see the DC is also engaged in talks, that's when we know that this thing has real fire. And immediately, Golf comes out and says, nope, not happening. DC's not interested in selling or interested in trading him. And that said, okay, that checks.
So what I hear from that rebuttal is that it's not going to be cheap, and we're not shopping him, but that doesn't mean we won't sell him. So it's a question of, I think the fact that LA sold Sebastian Lletget to New England for quite a bit of money for some GAM, I think that leads more fuel to the fire that something's possible. DC United does not necessarily. I think that what happened here is that I think Paul went to Hawaii with Russ, had a great time, went home to California for a while. It's like, you know what? It's really nice out here. Like it's no snow. It's kind of not so bad. I feel like my career, maybe I need a fresh start, because last year, you mentioned the injuries. Not only injuries, like there were some times where no one could figure out what was wrong with him. Like there was like a ghost hamstring injury where Hernan would in press conference say like, he's checking out fine. Like he's not, the scans say he's fine, but he's not comfortable, and he's, not committing fully because of the fact he's not comfortable, and we're going to get him right. But I still think that there's a good chance this happens. Honestly, I think there's a very good chance that the team is given an offer that makes them more inclined to move. I think maybe Lucy Rushton and the rest of the front office sort of see this as we're probably not going to, like you mentioned, Europe probably not as on the table as it was before the injury. This is our last chance to make a positive return on this investment. Maybe you do that and then trust yourself if you get blown over by an offer. So I would say if you're a DC United fan, I just ordered some Paul Arriola cards off of eBay. I probably should not have done that. Maybe I invited the challenge here, but I would not put this one completely out of your mind as something that could still happen here in the cold months.
I mean, it's the same thing where if you have a nice car and someone says, "Hey, I want to buy your car," your first response is absolutely not. Why would I sell my car? Here's $200,000. Okay, yeah, sure, I'll sell my car. Right. Yeah, go right ahead, take it. You got the cash right now? Great, let's do it. I think that's definitely the notion I'm getting from this.
It's not for sale, but it is for sale if you pay me enough.
Yeah,
because everything is.
And if they ship a truckload of GAM and DC's like, hey, we can go out and get, younger players that we think can be better. Hey, we've got this new analytics data department and we got these players that we're looking at and they think they can do something. I think Hernan's been spending some time. There was a player rumor, I think, that surfaced for a guy from Argentina that they're apparently looking at. I'll have to go back and dig through who that is.
He should not be a designated player. He should not be a GAM. But based on his stat sheet, it should not be that. So but those are the players you want to have him bring. Those I'm intrigued by those players, sort of like the non-breaking the bank, but hopefully elevating the mid-tier roster positions a little bit higher by finding some pedigree.
Yeah, I mean, maybe finding that diamond in the rough. I don't know. I think the scouting. I'll be very curious to see what, again, like I've talked about this, what the scouting department brings. I would still put this at 30%, especially with DC's how much they're going to want for him. And then how much again is LA willing to spend for him? I think LA are also looking at it as what's the price? Okay, let's look at some other players. And then if we get to February and they still don't have what they want and they have that GAM sitting there and they're like, you know what? DC, let's do a deal. We'll do $1.5 million in GAM for that.
I think thinking about him and Chicharito together would make. I think he might be a good asset for him. We'll see. You put it at 30. I put it at 45%. That's where I'll put it. Other DC United sort of rumor, not really necessarily rumors. I don't know if this happened since the last show, but we'll talk about it quickly. Rumors come out in the Honduran press that Andy Najar is dissatisfied with his contract offer. So offer here being an operative term. MLS, Pablo Maurer sort of confirms this in a way, saying his camp is displeased with the contract offer that they received from the club, and also put some numbers to it. A 50% raise for Andy. Unfortunately, Andy was only making $100,000 last year because he was off injured and sort of on a make it deal. So they offered him $150,000. That is a bit of a challenge because players like Frederick Briant were making $300K. All the other starters on the defensive side were making more money than he was by a substantial margin. This is one of those situations where DC has the contractual upper hand, right? They have an option on the player, so they can do whatever they want. They can say you're going to play next year for $150,000 or whatever the agreed upon amount was. The question is, how long-term intelligent of a move is that if it makes the player dissatisfied? More so in soccer than any other, although football is starting to become that way. Almost all of them are actually starting to become this way. An unhappy player can make a team's life pretty miserable. It's not good for the team. It's not good for the performance of the team. It's not good for the player. So if you want the player and the player is dissatisfied to the point of going to the media, his agent going to the media, whatever pattern that took, I think you need to reassess your strategy on how aggressive you want to be on pricing. Ted, what are your thoughts on sort of the kerfuffle about Andy Najar's pretty low salary? I think objectively low salary at $150K.
I think it is important to frame the reasoning, I think, is important here. And I think a lot of people are yelling at ownership with this. And I think this is very much, if you want to look at somebody to blame, you want to look at Lucy Rushton / Dave Casper, because regardless of what you pay Andy Najar, his salary is not coming out of Jason Levian's pockets.
Right.
it's coming out of MLS's pockets because he's not going to make enough to do that. This is a salary cap. This is a salary cap contingent move of a team trying to keep his salary as low as they can.
Yep.
Makes sense. Keep his salary as low as they can in order to keep your options open for other items. So that's definitely what I feel about this.
The challenge for me, and I am a Nahar, homer. That is not even pretending not to be. The challenge, I think I said this on Twitter at the time, is that when you have a player that has a skill set you don't have a replacement for, and whose skill set enabled you to do the thing you wanted to do really well last year, or more well than you thought you were going to be able to do, I think you have to negotiate differently with that player than you would with, say, another player on the roster, like a Junior Moreno. Mm-hmm. Junior Moreno, you have other players like Junior Moreno, and that's why they made a good faith offer. Probably like, if you want it, you can have it. If not, that's fine. You can walk if you'd like. It's a little bit different because they have an option year, but option years, I just don't like. I don't like them. I don't like club held option years of players who aren't like 18, 19 years old. Because it's one thing to say, we're going to take a chance on you as a young player. We don't know what you're going to be. We were hoping, and we didn't think Andy was going to play as well as he did, but he has a pedigree of when healthy can play that way. Mm-hmm. And I think potentially in a position where they didn't feel like they had a strong hand, his agent agreed to that deal, right? Andy and the agent did. They both regret that they did. So it's just something to watch. I think he's a player you would be really unwise to lose, because I think a player that can do what he does is going to be expensive or just challenging to find. There aren't a lot of players like him in MLS. So you're just making your job harder on yourself for saving $150,000 or whatever, just giving him Brion's money and say, be done with it. I don't know. I feel like it may be not worth the struggle. I don't know.
We'll see. I think it's also going to be an important thing how healthy. I mean, he was still on and off. I mean, there were times he was healthy scratches for games because they didn't want to run him to the ground. How was that looking? There were injury concerns for DC.
Brion played like 10 games or whatever it was. So,
fair enough. Yeah.
That's the challenge there. So keep your eyes peeled on that. There should, you hope, a resolution on that. He's not going to go anywhere. The team is not going to let him leave. So the outcomes are a better deal gets drawn up and everyone's happy, or Andy Nahar is angry during preseason and then maybe is injured more often. Who knows?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was saying real quick, I did want to get into we obviously had the MLS Cup. We haven't had a chance to really talk about it. New York City winning on penalty kicks. The first New York team to win MLS Cup. So basically they came back. Nope, don't want to do a parade. Probably a smart move considering, because all things considered, this felt like this should have been a bigger deal. I feel for MLS to have a team from the greater New York area from a money perspective.
Yeah, it's just a challenge, right? Because the way they built their roster is counterintuitive to the way you'd construct a major market franchise, and it's actually really a test of your philosophy around as it applies to DC, and that is build a team that wins, and then they'll come and be excited about it. And maybe DC is different than New York, but New York tried the Galacticos route when they started, and they sucked because they picked a bunch of old players and they were awful. They all no one else got a contract ever again, and they all retired because they were all basically retired when they went there. But they have a team that 9 out of 10 New Yorkers are going to be able to pick one name off that roster.
Yeah.
That's the struggle. Is you might be able to win, but you're still playing in Yankee Stadium. You're still not going to get any attention. I mean, like, there are college basketball teams that are going to get 10x the attention on a regular season game than NYCFC will in town.
Yeah, and I think the important thing you brought up is Yankee Stadium and then elsewhere. And
Citi Field and Red Bull Arena.
I mean, that's the biggest thing I think that's driving this is if this had happened in 2015, 2016 when the team was first announced, I think we're dealing with a way different story here. We're dealing with the beginnings of something. I think this does help them get a push to maybe get a stadium. I'll be curious to see what they look like next year. Do they start to get more people out to watch them play? I think the lack of a soccer stadium, a reputable home, is what really hurts this in a lot of ways.
And they are not going to Harrison.
Yeah.
New York City fans are like, you catch me dead before I'm on that train. Yeah, and I think you're going to lose players. Castellanos is definitely going to be sold. They'd be stupid not to sell him.
Or he's going to go to Man City. That's going to be his next spot.
That would be hilarious if he did that. But they would be crazy not to cash in on him, particularly if there's interest. Maxi Morales is a free agent. Mm-hmm. James Sands is a player that they're looking at potentially letting move on if he wants to. So as ever, teams are always different after they win the cup. Dynasty is a hard thing to build to maintain in MLS. Maybe you can't. I think
Seattle's come the closest. I think to doing that, and they've just been consistently good. 1.14 million people watch MLS Cup, one of the highest rated MLS Cups, and they are now looking for a $300 million TV deal. That's going to be a big thing to watch. What's that?
That's also what I'm looking for, a $300 million contract for my next job.
Yeah, how about this show? This show, we got a $300 million like TV deal that we're seeking.
We're negotiating. We have a Twitch partnership for $300 million. I wanted to get to some of the Twitter mailbag around this, and we addressed some of it already. Stat Guy Blake, Brian Smith, and Kevin Hernandez all asking about Paul Arriola. Do you think the Paul Arriola transfer news is serious enough to be concerned about? If so, who do you think replaces him? And the LA Galaxy for Arriola idea flamed out quickly, but how open do you think DC United is for a deal? Is it 100% no way, or would they act to move him for the right value? I think we answered that. I think that no player is untouchable in MLS, or particularly with an owner that is not infinitely wealthy. When you're infinitely wealthy, you can say things are not for sale, but if you're not, then things are in fact for sale sometimes. And you wanted to mention this one too. At Kev Hearn says, discuss how the Galaxy basically engaged in tampering and how the league will do nothing about it.
Yeah, I don't know if that arises. I think everybody's thinking of what happened with Nocerino in Orlando a few years back. That's a little bit of a different situation. That's a player.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's a player reaching out to him after DC was engaged in conversations with him. It worked out really well for DC, so I don't really care.
It really did.
But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know the extent of the conversations. I think agents are going to talk. There are going to be offers that are going to be on the table. I don't know if this arises to tampering. Paul knows LA. Paul knows what LA is. Paul, I'm sure, knows that the team gets offers for him. I'm sure every single day. I'm sure they get calls about it every single day. I would put this as I don't think he's the type of guy. I'm sure if he had the chance to move to LA, he'd be like, yeah, sure, to go home.
Most people would. I think that generally is true. And he didn't. I would say his injuries and the sort of the team's up and down form and the national team stuff, he didn't seem like he was having a great time last year on the field. A couple times he did, but he did not appear to be loving life to me. And he's got a serious girlfriend, a fiance maybe, I don't know. Like maybe they want to move. It's entirely possible. That's something you always got to be considered. It's not like he's like, I really want to move to Kansas City. Like it's LA. It makes sense. People understand. It would not be the craziest thing in the world.
I would put money on him still being suited up. I don't think LA is going to rise that. But anyway, were there any Twitter mailbag questions? Yes, there were a couple. There was one more.
Don Rankin wants us to make up DP rumors. We'll leave that for January.
Leonard Pahoy. There we go.
Yeah. Soccer Enjoyer Christian wants to know areas of most need for DC United. I think we sort of talked about roster needs, and obviously there are many spots to fill here. From a depth perspective, we're very thin. We're thin in a couple. We're very thin at left back. Mm-hmm. Kevin Paredes and then Prey, I think, is sort of the situation right now. I mean, obviously, unless you're saying Jacob Green is ready, probably isn't. Mm-hmm. So that's a major position of need. You want to find a starter there, I think, because if all things go well, you're looking to sell Paredes in the summer. I think. Yeah. I think if his trajectory increases, that's what you're looking for. You need a backup goalkeeper, someone to actually press Bill Hamid and also fill in capably when he's injured. And I would like to see maybe some younger competition at striker. You spent some money there, obviously, with Ola and Nigel Robertha. Nigel really didn't get a chance to really show what he could do. He was injured a lot. When he did play, there was some value there, particularly at the end of the season. He was playing as a second striker and really sort of offering something that nobody else that I've seen with DC United was able to offer, as far as that sort of second option and also facilitator. But I would like to see some young competition up there that can actually threaten. Giovanni Bolivar could have been that. He really wasn't that. And then also, I would say someone to press Edison Flores. We need a left winger, and we need someone and we need maybe a playmaker as well. That's a lot of needs.
Yeah, it's depth all over the place. Again, I think you hit the nail on the head with Edison Flores. I think a lot of this is indicative of how the front 11 looks. I mean, I feel like there still are a lot of question marks. I think some depth at center defense would be also probably needed as well, especially now we're playing a 3-man back line instead of like a 2-man center back line.
It'll help that Steve will be available from the beginning of the year this year, and it will also help if Donovan does not get his foot hurt again. So knock on wood for everybody. Injuries, if we can get through a preseason, particularly because I think that we start so early, if we can get through a preseason where people are not injured and we're not starting sort of in the hole like we were last year, I think we're in a decent spot. Even if they don't add a bunch of players, we finished 9th.
Yeah,
like
this is still in my opinion with the roster constructed. Even if they added some so-so additions, I think it's still a playoff team. I think we definitely won enough games last season to be a playoff team. Let's be clear. Like we won 14 games. All the other teams that made the playoffs won 13 games, someone less games than us. It was the issue of not being able to see some games out. I think they killed this team.
Now, would this team have, if they got into the playoffs, could you have seen them running the table and getting to the final? Probably not. But RSL also probably was not your pick to do it, and they made it pretty damn far. So the playoffs are bananas. You just got to get in. That's all that matters. We almost did.
Just got to get in. Let's talk about some champions. Let's talk about some teams that actually won the championship. Not that we're not searching DC, but the Spirit did win the championship. We would like them to win.
We would also like them to win the championship.
We would like them to start a dynasty. I think it's still possible in NWSL to have a dynasty, and I think the Spirit hopefully are well on their way. Obviously, we had the expansion draft 2 hours long. We all knew that I was hoping it would come early. Like I was hoping like first pick it would just kind of be over with.
Yep.
But then it kind of like drags on, and you're like, okay, maybe the Spirit exit this unscathed. Fortunately, we did this. We should have known since Kim McCauley is from the DC area. I will say she had a role in this. I will put the blame entirely on her for this. She now works for Angel City FC. Paige Nielsen going to Angel City FC in the expansion draft. They got some allocation money, I think, for this, right? They get a little bit for losing a player.
They did, and also I think they also get protection next year.
I'm not sure if they work the same. DC also gets protection next year, which we forgot to mention.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it works the same.
Paige is an accomplished player who in previous years was an every game starter. Mm-hmm. She played a little bit less once the national team players got back. The challenge, it would have been nice to keep her because there is going to be a lot of national team absences again this year. But if you're looking at a place where you have some depth to lose a player, probably a center back, probably more there than anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So I think that, Paige, I think she slots in, not knowing the rest of Angel City's roster. Good bet to slot in right there immediately as a veteran center back with some skill for that club.
And we'll get into a minute, but you feel like maybe they had this knowing because they went out and they signed Aaliyah Martin from the University of Michigan, who's a defender who can maybe fill Paige Nielsen's role as kind of younger. She's a 5th year out of the University of Michigan. I think she took the extra year of eligibility to get that. And I think somehow she wasn't eligible for the draft and like the Spirit had her rights. I'm not sure how that whole thing worked.
Just like we traded a player, I don't have it on the notes here. They traded a player that I didn't know we had for protection, I believe, from one of the clubs. Maybe from San Diego. I don't know. But Allie Martin played U17 national team. I think from a standpoint of she's cheap. She was on the Discovery roster already, so that they're already in a good position there.
Yeah.
Other sort of note. Well, we'll do the big one here. Chris Ward finally gets announced as the full-time coach.
Yes.
Well deserved. I don't think you could have not given it to him. I think you would have had to really turn yourself into a human pretzel to not give the manager who guides your team through the tsunami of S that the Spirit went through and not give it to him after they win the championship. I recommend, we always recommend The Athletic here. Read The Athletic interview he did with Meg Linehan this morning. I will tell you what I think about him. I haven't gotten to speak to him. I've not done any media availability with him yet. I'm
working on that
in the coming year. He is a thoughtful man that really is not so hung up on his position as the manager to solve everyone's problems, to be the loudest voice in the room, to say my way or the highway. And I don't think it was just because he was interim. I think that's actually his personality. I don't imagine you could have a better personality for that situation than Chris Ward. He let the players lead. When there were things to be said, he allowed the players to say them. Obviously, he would chime in on tactics and things like that, but he gave space to the players to almost run the ship themselves. And you could say that, you could read that uncharitably and say that's a coach who does not have control of the room, or he's young and a manager would not normally allow this. And maybe in a normal year, you wouldn't have it be such a democracy. You'd want to have a little bit more order and a little more hierarchy. But he knew that the only way to allow this team, only way to shepherd this team through, if they were as talented as they were, was to not be another voice at them shouting and another voice at them telling them that they're wrong and they're doing it wrong. He called out specifically how halftime talks were different under him than they were under Richie. Under Richie, he was screaming at them. He was giving them the Sir Alex Ferguson treatment instead of talking about, all right, well, here's 3 things we didn't do well, and here's how we're going to do them better, and here's how I think we should do them better, and not necessarily what do you guys think, but like more collaborative about it. Mm-hmm. So kind of refreshing, so bizarre of an idea when you think about everything else you know about sports and how managers sort of are, portrayed in the media, and even the way that they portray themselves as being, I'm the guy with the ideas, we're going to do as I say. I just thought it was so refreshing to hear from that and for him to know what the team needed and also sort of subjugate his own ego, which is such a hard thing to do, I think, as a manager or as a man or anything else, and just say like, I'm gonna cede my space here. I don't need to be the one to do this. We're gonna succeed through the leadership of the group instead of the one. Did you get a chance to read that, or what do you think about Chris being signed?
I have not had a chance to read it. I mean, I think you have to give it to him. I think it will be. It's interesting you bring up, I guess, his attitude, because I think when everybody talks about a manager, they all want to be the Sir Alex Ferguson. They all want to be the Jose Mourinho. They all want to be the guy in the room who has the complete control of everybody. But I mean, there are plenty of managers out there that are successful. Brian Smetzer is not an imposing force. He just knows what to do in the right cases for Seattle. He looks like
an IT project manager.
Yeah, he does. And so there are many different ways to manage to manage a soccer team, and I think there are coaches out there that can do that with a soft touch. They don't have to be the dictatorial, Napoleon out there, ordering things around. And I think what Chris Ward does what actually is a really important thing, in that he read the room. He could have come in and said, "This is now here's my chance to really put my stamp on this." But he's
for sure.
But he knew the situation. He knew how to run, and that's an important aspect for a manager. Absolutely, you had to bring him back in. I'm so glad he's back. I think the players are glad he's back, and let's go. This is going to be. We'll talk a little bit about the ownership situation and that whole saga, which I don't think he even had in the show notes. Maybe he had it down below. But man, crazy.
Chris Ward with emotional intelligence off the charts. I think what you can say, and the results on the field warranted him being retained. So great for him, great for the club. And then a thing that warrants almost no follow-up, Trinity Rodman wins the 2021 Chipotle Young Player of the Year award for U.S. Soccer.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Great. I hope she gets a Chipotle gift card from that. And she was on one of the ESPN soccer shows that Sebi Salazar runs.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't have Young Player of the Year award sponsored by beer company, so she could have gotten the NWSL championship one. There we go.
I think she probably likes the Chipotle one. I think I have a feeling that if she's a normal person of that age, she'll probably be like, "Oh, dope! I'll take this."
Yeah.
The Spirit so the draft happened. The Spirit signed 7,000 players.
Yeah, they signed up. I think Tiana Alexander, basically being the anti version of some of the players that were taken by other NWSL clubs, in her stances for social justice and things like that. So I'm kind of excited about her to have her on the team. Definitely,
it was wild that they were just like doling out. Everyone was sort of looking at this like, they're not going to pick for 3 hours. Like, why am I going to watch this? And then, as ever, the Spirit said, as you'd like to say, hold my beer. We're gonna wheel and deal here. 85,000 allocation for the 14th overall. Got her a quick buzz on Alexander. Normally a winger. 21 goals, 22 assists over the 5 years. As Ted said, she took the extra year. All SEC in 2021, and interestingly played on Arsenal's academy team and the England under-17. There are, and we'll talk. There was another international player as well. They're
Lucy
one
Shepherd.
short.
Yeah,
they're one short on international spots, so something's going to happen here, I think, pretty quickly. Maybe an acquisition of said spot. We'll see. Just going to run through these quick because they added a bunch of players. Madison Elwell from Vanderbilt. That cost another $85,000 to the Reign. All SEC second team 3 times in a row. Left footer, capable of playing multiple positions. 12 goals, 29 assists. Chris Ward saying she looks maybe as a wingback, left back, which, as we just said, is going to be a position of need after Tegan McGrady was sold. And Julia Rotter would fill in, but Julia Rotter is also going to do national team duty with Sweden. Go ahead.
I was saying a lot of teams definitely wheeling and dealing in the draft. I think there's a definite realization, I think, about what you need. You need to get players in the draft because you're gonna have absences for international play.
Absolutely. Third player selected was Lucy Shepherd, a forward out of Hofstra. Aston Villa system, England under-19s, all CAA, second team in 3 seasons, 25 goals, 25 assists. And then this most recent season, 8 goals, 12 assists. So big year for her at the end. 2 more picks. Aubrey Harding out of UNCW, 8 goals and 7 assists in 14 games. Overall, 23 goals, 20 assists, and 68 all CAA second team. And last, the one that is funniest to me, Jordan Thompson, a center back out of Gonzaga at 5'2", 6 goals, 81 appearances, potentially a fullback. I don't know that you can. I don't even know in the NWSL if you can make it as a center back if you have 5'2". That would be a bit of a struggle. So they loaded up. Chris Ward said the goal was to provide forward options to the team so that they can handle all of the absences that go next year. They feel like they're strong relatively. They did not want to give up Tegan McGrady, but they were looking at how do we keep the rest of our team intact. That was the move we had to make. So more. I think there'll be some more positions sort of changing hands here, but they are well set. They were a team that was young to start. And they're still young. They're a year older. They're a championship under their belt, and they're still young. They also added Gabby Vincent from the KC Current for $25,000 allocation. She went to UMD, and will bring some more depth on the defensive side, particularly at defensive midfielder when you have Andy Sullivan, who will for sure, hopefully, fingers crossed, be in the national team picture all summer.
I mean, this was definitely a depth draft. This was let's take some flyers. Let's go grab some depth. Let's make sure we're all set to go. North Carolina Courage and Portland Thorns not reading the room of what their fan base is, which is becoming a common thing in NWSL. The Portland Thorns draft picks has some tweets out there, and I do think it's important to bring this up in the sense that it's a situation in which I feel like NWSL owners with the Portland Thorns, I kind of think this is they were looking at the stat sheet and there wasn't really a character analysis, and maybe they realized this character analysis and they were certainly ready for the question. But I think this is something that NWSL and I know you have some opinions on it. You know, your concern is for the players, and I think that's completely valid. But the fans do matter in this situation as well. And when you are somebody who is trans, who is gay, who maybe has some of these, who has this, who lives that type of lifestyle, and certainly, you know, should be respected, to have a player that you're cheering for week in and week out, you know, they don't hold that same beliefs. It has an impact, and in my opinion, the fans do matter in what they say. And I think the Portland Thorns are making a terrible mistake, regardless of what she might bring to you on the field. It's a terrible mistake. And then the North Carolina Courage signing Janelle Daniels. Jaylene Daniels. I should make sure I'm correct on that. Again, another move that just, regardless of what she might bring to you on the field and her skill set, you're risking your diehard fans, your fans that show up. You're also impacting. There is an incredible amount of trans representation and gay representation on not only in the locker rooms, but in the media, amongst your employees and everything like that. And that matters when you have somebody who doesn't think that you should have the same rights, who doesn't think that you should be involved in sports the way some of these people feel. I think is an important consideration for these teams to make when they're selecting these players. Any team employee is going to have, there are players that are going to have to interact with them. I think that should be an important calculation. And it's very clear that some organizations are not taking that route.
You also have a very good left back already in Carson Pickett.
Yeah.
So I think it, so I saw a tweet right before the show that sort of helped me put a little bit in perspective. Almost in every single other sport, I'm speaking almost exclusively of men's sports here, the goal of the team is to put the best players on the field and try to win at the expense of everything else. There have been horrible people that have been signed who have committed crimes, who have said horrible things, who have done horrible things. But at that point, for what they are not in jail. They are free to be signed and are so signed, and that is what happens. And the fan base will be, just traditionally, will be upset at the time of the signing. They will make their voices heard, and then the games will start and wins will happen, and then they'll just say, all right, well, I'm not this guy's friend, but I'm glad that we're winning. This league is different, and I think that. And I saw a tweet. I was trying to find it. I wanted to say it verbatim. But basically it was saying that NWSL fans take their politics very seriously. It's because other than the WNBA, this is the only representation for gay women basically in the sport. And this is the one space in which they can be aggressively proud of who they are, and they can sort of revert the power balance that there is in every other sport where you're tolerated for being different. Like there's, you're allowed to be gay on the team and that's fine, versus
you're allowed to be trans on the team and that's fine. I mean,
right. And versus in the WNBA and here where it's normalized. It's a default thing that is, I mean, the percent, I mean, who cares, but the percentage is very high of the league, both WNBA and NWSL, where there are people of these communities that make up these positions that are playing both open and privately. So I thought that was a good perception, sort of a difference in why the NWSL is so different and why the WNBA is different. These fans have a threshold that is higher than every other sport as to who can be on their teams. And you alluded to it before. My main concern in the North Carolina Courage situation, this is a player that played on their team before. They have been a bit taken apart here in the last year. Jess McDonald traded. There are a few players left sort of from the dynasty, but I think there's a big changeover happening, which you should do when you sort of lose your power, which they had, and they see the ascendant teams around them. But I think these players are now in a better position than they have ever been to speak their mind about how having a player like this in the locker room affects them. Does it affect them as much as it affects the fan base? For me, that's the number one priority: is how is she as a teammate? Can they get along on the field? Do people with the franchise, either in ownership, not ownership, I don't care about the owners, in the staff or the front office of the players, can they coexist? Do they feel, I don't want to say safe, but do they feel like they're in a good work environment where they feel like they are respected, regardless of what this one person thinks and says? If they are, then I think it's something that you can figure out a way to make work. And then the team fell down by not anticipating this reaction from their fans, because they should have known. Anyone should have known. We would have known. Anyone would have known. So you either don't care and you're signing them in despite of your fans' reaction, which is possible. I believe the owner made a comment, sort of said, we evaluated the on the field and off the field contributions, I think they said, and we went with it. So, and they didn't talk to the supporters. Mm-mm. So that was where they really fell down. I think you alluded to it with Portland too. Like, you're going to make your decisions. You're allowed to do that. You can hire anybody you want, but you should be prepared for what that means. Be prepared for the blowback. If you don't care, if you say, all right, well, am I going to lose some season tickets? But we think this is the thing we're going to do. Then, stand up and be about it. Say that that's what you're going to do. And then I almost respect that more. That's a fair broker. You're not hiding behind something and hoping it goes away. You're saying, this is how I feel. If you want to align yourself with me and this brand and this team, then do so. And if you do not, I respect that, and you do not have to. I think that's the more adult, mature way to handle something like this than maybe what actually happened. To me,
the Portland Thorns move. The Courage one is just, to me, is an all-around bad move. The one that gets me about who the Thorns picked is that when you talk about a draft, normally in any other sport, there's a combine, there's player interviews, there's an assessment, a deep assessment that's done on players in certain situations. And, there are players who are, who get identified as having character issues, and basically being, shoved out of the league. We've had players that took strong stances against what was going on in their teams, against what was going on in America, and were shown the door in a lot of cases. And then here you have somebody who has very hurtful things they've said on Twitter. They've quote tweeted certain individuals that tweet very hurtful things. And then to have them that not even to be in the consideration, I just have to imagine if they looked at that and said, "Oh, that's fine. We think she's talented. We're going to take her." Then that's really bad. If we didn't even bother to check, and that's even worse, especially for a team like Portland, which has the resources to do those types of things.
Right.
So
I remember MLS kids being drafted and them realizing that their Twitter was public and either making it private really quick or scrubbing it. I remember seeing this in live time. It was happening during drafts.
This is going to be something that I think you're going to see a lot more often, for sure.
Oh, for sure. And we talked about this before the call too, or before the show started. Like, this is commonplace. Like those tweets, that could be 7 guys on the Chicago White Sox roster, and it sucks that that's the case. But that is like there's a big chunk of this country that feels that way. Those podcasts, all those shows, that guy that we were mentioning, we're not gonna say his name. Like, they're the most retweeted stuff on Facebook. Like, there are a lot of people that think that way. It's just that we, this league, and even MLS to the same degree, have a different constituency than, say, Major League Baseball, the NFL. And it's just something that the league needs to be cognizant of. There aren't a great number of secret untapped MLS fans that you could just like replace the diehards with. It's not the NFL. Like, you have to be very responsive to your fans, because you're not going to find 3 to replace the one that walks out the door. So with that in mind, be a little bit better with your pre-research. Have some answers ready to go, because I will tell you, in our like a year and a half covering NWSL, the fans of this club are all internet detectives, and will find anything you ever said or did and they'll have it in like in a easy to digest format in 20 minutes. So you can't slip by. Be prepared.
There was an incredibly talented player for LA that in 2 minutes found himself out of the door during the COVID pandemic. I don't know if you remember that from, I can't remember his name, but there was a player whose tweets from
his wife.
Yeah, his wife coming out. I mean,
that was a tough one to me. That one still is tough to me. Like, his wife was wilding out on Twitter. They're like, say your wife was wrong. It's like, I'm not going to do that, man. I have to live with her. Like, I'm married to this person. Well, I can find another club. Yeah, I can go somewhere else.
There's also, and I feel like NWSL is maybe still learning this lesson. I feel like that was an indication that MLS has learned very, very quickly that you need to at the very least appease your fan. Now, there's still players out there that, there's a certain defender, Jeff Cameron for Cincinnati, who probably would agree with most of what the Portland draft pick said. But I mean, that's the nature of what we see. We see a lot in men's sports, especially like you pointed out in baseball. But I think MLS, when it's that open and that blatant, MLS knew at that point. That almost seemed to be an indication that they learned from the Iron Front thing. They learned what their fan base is, and they said, we need to make sure we're making moves that respect them as fans and what the leanings are. Even though that's not
even if they don't believe it.
Yeah.
Even if they don't care, because they don't. Because any of these businesses don't actually care. But I think it's just from a pure like capitalist perspective. Like, you cannot alienate the people that pay the money for your thing to exist.
And there are people, I honestly have no clue how many it's going to be. From the moves that we've seen from Portland. Portland was already in trouble. Let's from everything that's been going on and the push the fans have made. There were a lot of fans that were on the fence about renewing season tickets that have already said, I'm not renewing after this. This was almost the last straw. There is going to be an impact here. How much of an impact? Who knows? I've always wondered how much of Twitter is really on we all talk about DC fans and how upset we get over Twitter at the team. I see maybe tweets from like the same 10 to 50 people on Twitter talk about DC. there are 20,000 fans that show up to DC games every week.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that is actual microcosm of like the fan base? So I mean that, and that's, I think, the interesting thing we're gonna learn with this. Is there a noticeable impact in a place like Portland, which is soccer is by far one of the biggest sports there? So fun times.
I think it's an in-person case study about Twitter being real life.
Yes,
you get to see it in live action. We'll watch that develop. I'm sure it's NWSL. There will be other things in between our next episode in 2022. So.
Yeah, lots of things to talk about. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. It's been awesome to share 2020 with you guys. We actually got a full season. We had soccer. We got to go to games. Please,
there was a championship.
Get vaccinated. Get your booster. We won a championship too. Yes, from the Spirit. Get vaccinated. Get your booster. Stay safe this holiday season, and then hopefully we will be back at Audi Field, cheering on DC United, Washington Spirit, whatever. Maybe you come join me down in Richmond. Have some fun times.
We're going to make it happen.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for an awesome year. We're definitely going to be back next year. Stay tuned on that. Lots of cool things to come. We will catch you guys in 2022. Vamos.
Vamos.